It's supposed to be the place where summer memories are made, bright slides, crashing waves, and endless laughter echoing through the air. But behind the colorful rides and family fun, water parks hide a darker reality. Beneath the surface, there are chilling stories of joy turning into terror, where a single slip, a mechanical failure, or a moment of neglect ended in tragedy. Today, we're diving into the 5 most disturbing deaths at water parks. Cases so shocking they forever changed how people look at these so-called havens of fun.
Action Park is perhaps the most infamous amusement park of all time. Their rides were poorly designed, their safety record was shocking, and their juvenile staff were underpaid and undertrained. It was estimated that up to 100 people per summer would leave the park seriously injured, with people often joking, "I managed to survive Action Park."
It was July 8th, 1980, a bright summer day at Action Park in Vernon, New Jersey. For 19-year-old George Larson Jr., it was supposed to be just another day of fun. He had no way of knowing that the ride he chose would become his last, and that his name would be forever tied to the chilling legacy of a park later known as Class Action Park. Action Park was still new back then, only 2 years into its existence, yet already infamous among locals for pushing limits that most amusement parks wouldn't dare cross. Its crown jewel, the Alpine Slide, was a 700-foot stretch of concrete and fiberglass twisting down the mountain. Riders would sit on flimsy plastic sleds with a single handbrake, a device that was supposed to control speed, but more often than not it didn't. Too little pressure and you'd rocket down uncontrollably. Too much and the sled behind you could slam right into your back. It was a gamble every rider made. George climbed onto his sled that day, like countless others before him, maybe with a nervous laugh, maybe with a spark of excitement. The track stretched before him, sharp turns, steep drops, and the illusion of control at his fingertips. At first, everything seemed fine. Families watched from below. But in the middle of that carefree atmosphere, George's life was ticking down by the second. As he hit a tricky curve, witnesses say his sled suddenly lifted, jolting violently off the track. In that instant, he was airborne. Then came the impact. George's head struck a boulder with catastrophic force. The ride was over, not with laughter, but with horror. Park employees rushed to him, but the scene was grim. George was unconscious, his injuries severe. He was rushed to the hospital, clinging to life. For 8 days, his family sat by his side, watching, hoping, praying. But the damage was too great. On July 16th, George Larson Jr. lost his battle. Just 19 years old. Gone in a way that was as preventable as it was tragic. What came to light afterward only deepened the heartbreak. The Alpine Slide wasn't just dangerous. It was practically a conveyor belt of injuries. Former employees admitted that accidents were so common the park had to buy its own ambulance just to keep up with the constant stream of wounded riders. On any given summer day, dozens walked away with cuts, bruises, broken bones, or worse. And yet, despite the warnings, despite the accidents piling up, the ride stayed open. Safety was never the priority. Thrills were. Profits were. George's death should have been the breaking point, the moment the park's owner, Gene Mulvihill, was forced to face the consequences of his reckless empire. But instead, little changed. The Alpine Slide kept running, sending more people to the hospital, and the park's reputation grew darker by the year. Locals started calling it names: Traction Park, Accident Park, Class Action Park. Behind the jokes was a chilling truth. 6 people would eventually die there, and countless others would leave with scars they'd carry for life. It was July 24th, 1982. A hot summer day in Vernon, New Jersey, and Action Park was alive with chaos. Among the crowds was 15-year-old George Lopez, just another kid chasing relief from the heat, laughing with friends, ready to dive into a day that promised fun and adventure. But what awaited him wasn't joy. It was the moment that would turn Action Park's already notorious reputation into legend. The heart of the park that day was the tidal wave pool, a monster of an attraction that dwarfed most wave pools across the country. It stretched 100 feet wide, 250 feet long, and could pack in nearly 1,000 people. George waded in, probably feeling the same mix of excitement and nerves that everyone did. Maybe he stuck close to his friends at first. Maybe he drifted farther out without realizing it. The waves grew stronger, louder, swallowing shouts and laughter in a crash of water. At 8 feet deep, the pool gave no mercy, and with its bottom painted blue, spotting someone in trouble was almost impossible. What happened next is blurry, even now. Maybe George was pulled under by the surge, maybe pushed deeper by the crowd. What's certain is that at some point he began to struggle. In that sea of bodies and white water, no one noticed. Lifeguards, undertrained, overwhelmed, some making dozens of rescues a day, didn't see him in time. His fight against the waves was silent, invisible, until suddenly he was gone. When lifeguards finally pulled him out, panic erupted. People watched in horror as CPR was performed on the concrete, but the truth was already written. George Lopez, just 15 years old, was pronounced dead. The wave pool had claimed its first victim. The community was shattered. George wasn't just a statistic. He was a boy with energy, kindness, and a future ripped away in minutes. His family was left broken, struggling to make sense of how their son could drown in plain sight in a place meant to be safe, and George's death wasn't the last. Two more young men, Donald DePass in 1984 and Gregory Grand Champs in 1987, would drown in the very same pool. Each time the pattern repeated, a tragedy, a minor adjustment, and business as usual. The grave pool, as employees grimly nicknamed it, had a body count that could no longer be ignored. Yet somehow the ride stayed open, as if lives lost were just the cost of doing business.
Takes its name from Virginia Graham Baker, a young girl who drowned after she was trapped underwater from powerful suction from a drain in a backyard spa. The law is aimed at preventing any other child or adult from being killed or injured from this hidden entrapment hazard.
It was supposed to be an ordinary summer afternoon in 2002. 7-year-old Virginia Graham Baker, known as Graham to her family, had always been comfortable in the water. She had learned to swim at the age of 3, joined her local swim and dive team, and carried herself with a confidence that belied her age. At a friend's party, she slipped into a hot tub, a place meant for play, laughter, and relaxation. But within minutes, the unimaginable happened. Graham never resurfaced. Hidden beneath the surface was a silent killer, the immense suction force of a faulty drain cover. It pinned her down with such power that even her own mother, Nancy Baker, who rushed in to save her, could not pull her free. 2 men fought to release her, but by the time they managed to rip the drain loose, it was too late. Graham had drowned, her life stolen not by recklessness or carelessness, but by a piece of equipment so ordinary it went unnoticed, until it became deadly. The official cause of death was suction entrapment due to a faulty drain cover. But for Nancy Baker, it was more than just a cause listed on a report. It was a call to action. Her daughter's death was preventable, and she knew no other family should have to experience the same nightmare. Fueled by grief and determination, Nancy began a relentless fight in Washington, demanding lawmakers confront the hidden dangers lurking in America's pools and spas. Her persistence paid off. In 2007, Congress passed the Virginia Graham Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act, signed into law by President George W. Bush. The law forced manufacturers to redesign pool and spa drains, required public pools to retrofit their systems, and pushed awareness about the risks of suction entrapment into the national conversation. For the first time, families had protection against a danger that had remained largely invisible. Yet the act's reach came with limits. It only applied to public pools and spas, leaving private pool owners free from compliance. Even today, some community associations and residential complexes misinterpret or ignore the law, forgetting that the word public stretches to include shared neighborhood facilities. Graham's story is a haunting reminder that tragedy often hides in plain sight. Pools, symbols of joy and family fun, can become scenes of horror when safety is overlooked, and Graham was not the only victim. In 2007, another little girl, 6-year-old Abigail Taylor, went swimming at the Minneapolis Golf Club. A misstep led her to fall onto an open pool drain. The suction was so powerful it pulled her small intestine out through her body, a gruesome, almost unthinkable injury. Abigail endured unimaginable suffering, requiring a rare triple organ transplant to replace her small intestine, liver, and pancreas. For months, she could not eat or drink. Machines kept her alive, but despite all efforts, Abigail eventually died. Her case echoed an earlier one from 1993, when 5-year-old Valerie Lakey of North Carolina suffered catastrophic injuries from a pool drain made by the same company. That case ended in a record settlement, but decades later, the same design flaws were still destroying lives. For years, the Consumer Product Safety Commission had tracked entrapment cases: hair caught in drains, limbs sucked in, jewelry or swimsuits trapped by force, children pinned against outlets they couldn't escape. Between 1999 and 2007, 74 incidents were officially recorded, with children ages 5 to 9 suffering the most. Behind each number was a family forever changed. The deaths of Graham Baker and Abigail Taylor transformed grief into law, but they also exposed a chilling truth. Sometimes the most dangerous threats are the ones we never think to fear. A child who can swim like a fish, a pool that looks perfectly safe, a drain that seems insignificant, until in a split second it becomes an unstoppable trap. And so, every time parents watch their children dive beneath the water, there is a silent promise, born from tragedy. Vigilance must never waver. Because if Virginia Graham Baker's story teaches anything, it is that a single overlooked detail can turn joy into heartbreak in an instant.
Kyra Hill was 11 years old when she drowned at a water park. For almost 3 years, her family have been grieving, waiting for answers.
It was August 6th, 2022, the kind of summer day meant for laughter, celebration, and memories. 11-year-old Kyra Hill had gone to a birthday party at Liquid Leisure, a water park near Windsor. She was full of energy, a spirited child whose father described her as a beaming beacon of light, a football-loving, fearless girl who dreamed of becoming a Manchester United star, or if not, a lawyer who would never defend evil people in court. She was strong-willed, protective of her friends, and known for standing up against bullies. But on that day, all the promise of her future would be lost in the very place that should have been safe. Kyra entered the designated swimming zone of the lake, surrounded by other children, laughter echoing across the water. But beneath the surface was danger few understood. The water was deeper than parents had been warned, more than 15 feet in places. And despite sharp drops in depth, the only signs at the park warned of shallow water. There were no clear instructions about safety ratios, no demand that children wear buoyancy aids, no visible emergency plan. When Kyra began to struggle, when her small body was pulled under, the clock started ticking on a preventable disaster. A lifeguard, just 17 years old, noticed her distress and jumped in. For a brief moment there was hope, but he surfaced again, unable to save her. Trained only for surface rescues, not underwater emergencies. Minutes passed. The search was disorganized, staff unsure of what to do, and children's voices mingled with shouts of panic. 10 minutes slipped by before a second search of the area even began. And then the most haunting detail. It took 37 minutes before anyone dialed 999. Instead of calling emergency services right away, the park's owner tried phoning a diver and an off-duty firefighter. Calls went unanswered. When diver Chris Knight finally entered the water, more than an hour had passed since Kyra was last seen alive. By then, the frantic search had turned into chaos. Parents described it as a nightmare. Police called it confusion, and every moment was a reminder that time was running out. When Kyra was finally found, the lake's murky water offered almost no visibility. She was pulled out, rushed to hospital, but it was too late. Her official cause of death was drowning, but her family knew what had really killed her. Gross negligence, failure to act, failure to protect. At the inquest, Senior Coroner Heidi Connor did not mince words. She ruled that Kyra had been unlawfully killed. The evidence was damning. No warnings about the depth of the water, no emergency plan, no risk assessments, no control measures for the obvious dangers. Parents had not been advised to accompany children in safe ratios, and no requirement for buoyancy aids had been enforced. The systems that should have kept Kyra safe had failed at every level. Her father, Leonard Hill, fought back tears as he described his daughter, her captivating smile, her fierce moral compass, her dreams. He reminded the court and the world that summer should be for joy, not funerals. It should never mark the day we mourn our children's lives, he said. The terrible reality is that without urgent reform, more families will face these devastating goodbyes. His words were not just grief, but a call to action. The time for words has passed. Now is the moment for action. The coroner's courtroom was heavy with the weight of his loss, with the chilling realization that Kyra's death was not an accident. It was the result of failures that could have been prevented. Even the coroner, addressing the family directly, spoke with sorrow. Members of the family, at no point have I forgotten that this was about your 11-year-old, Kyra, and I am so very sorry that you are here today. Kyra's story is not just about one child. It is about every child who steps into a pool, lake, or water park, trusting that the adults in charge have done their part to keep them safe. It is about every parent who sends their child to a birthday party expecting laughter, not tragedy. And it is a haunting reminder that negligence can be just as deadly as the water itself. It was a late summer afternoon at Waterworld in Stoke-on-Trent, the kind of day when families filled the pools with laughter, the air heavy with splashes and squeals of joy. Parents watched from the edges, children raced through the slides, and in the lagoon area, a 4-year-old girl played like so many others, her small frame lost among the waves of excitement. No one imagined that within minutes, the atmosphere of fun would turn into one of silence, panic, and heartbreak. At around 4:15 p.m., she was found unconscious in the water. In an instant, the music of the park was drowned out by shouts for help. Lifeguards rushed to her side, pulling her tiny body onto the poolside tiles, and began CPR, while desperate parents ushered their children away from the scene. Guests were cleared from the lagoon, the festive noise replaced by the sound of urgent commands, chest compressions, and the arrival of paramedics. Every second stretched endlessly as staff and emergency crews fought to bring her back. By 4:20 p.m., ambulances and police had arrived, the flashing blue lights cutting through the summer haze outside. She was stabilized as best as they could manage and rushed to hospital. For a moment, hope lingered, but despite the combined efforts of lifeguards, paramedics, and hospital staff, the fight was lost. The little girl was gone. Word spread quickly. Families who had been there whispered about what they had witnessed, shaken by how fast everything had unraveled. Waterworld, a place that branded itself as the U.K. quote, SNO, one tropical indoor aqua park, was in shock. That evening, the park announced it would remain closed, not just as a gesture of respect, but as a sign of the grief that hung over every staff member who had tried desperately to save her. It is with great sadness that we learned of this little girl's passing, a spokesperson said. All our thoughts are with her family and loved ones during these extremely difficult times. Staffordshire Police confirmed the death, offering their condolences, but also urging the public not to speculate. Detective Chief Inspector Lucy Maskew spoke with compassion, saying, "Our thoughts are with the family at this terribly sad time. We are now making inquiries and looking to establish the circumstances of the incident. We would ask that members of the public avoid speculating in these early stages of the investigation and allow the family to grieve." And so, the bright colors of Waterworld's lagoon became forever marked by tragedy. For one family, a day meant for joy and memory-making ended in the unimaginable, a loss no parent should ever endure. The water that had been a place of play only moments earlier became a silent witness to a fragile life cut short. The investigation may in time reveal answers, but for now, only grief remains.